There was some dubious advice coming out of the
Excuse me?
There was some dubious advice, some questionable medical advice coming out of non-doctors at this podium. How do you think that affected the progress of this pandemic?
Well, you remember, if you were around, that at this podium I contradicted those, which set off a whole series of things in my life. I mean, we have to continue, and we were just talking about this a little while ago. The way you counter misinformation and disinformation is that to do whatever you can as often as you can to provide correct information. The people who have correct information, who take science seriously, who don't have strange way out theories about things, but who base what they say on evidence and data, need to speak up more, because the other side that just keeps putting out misinformation and disinformation seems to be tireless in that effort, and it's going to be very difficult.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about a White House press conference that went off the rail as the affirmative action press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, tried desperately to shield Dr. Anthony Fauci from tough questions from actual real journalists, not Democrat Party propaganda artists posing as journalists, okay? As allegedly, during this press conference, a reporter from the Daily Caller by the name of Diana Glebova attempted to ask Dr. Fauci multiple times throughout the press conference about the origins of COVID-19, something that he's probably going to be under investigation for. And allegedly, Karine Jean-Pierre just would not call on this reporter. So as Dr. Fauci was stepping back from the podium, the reporter asked her question again, and Karine Jean-Pierre lost it, okay? She lost it on the reporter, went off on the reporter for trying to ask Dr. Fauci a tough question, and a back and forth ensued in which you had other journalists come to the defense of the Daily Caller journalists simply trying to ask Dr. Fauci a tough question by saying that, hey, you need to call on everybody in the room. She has a good question. You should call on her, okay? But again, we all know what's going on here. Karine Jean-Pierre is gatekeeping for Anthony Fauci. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and play this clip that is going viral of Karine Jean-Pierre melting down over Dr. Fauci getting asked hard questions. Take a look.
About this.
Dr. Fauci, only 13% of...
Hold on one second. We have a process here. I'm not calling out on people who yell. And you're being disrespectful to your colleagues, and you're being disrespectful to our guests. I will not call on you if you yell. And also, you're taking time off the clock because Dr. Fauci has to leave in a couple of minutes. I'm done. I'm not getting into a back and forth with you. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Dr. Fauci,
but she's
only
asking a great question.
Go ahead, Jeremy. Go ahead, Jeremy.
You ask your question, you should allow her to answer the
Go ahead,
question.
Jeremy.
She asked a valid
Jeremy.
question, Dr. Fauci, on the origin of COVID-19.
It is not your turn. It is not your turn.
You can't understand people. That's the thing. You can't read a press briefing. You need to call from people across the room. She has a valid question. She's asking about the origin of COVID-19.
I hear the question.
And Dr. Fauci is the best person to answer.
I hear your question, but we're not doing this the way you want it. This is the disrespectful. It is. I'm done. Simon, I'm done. Simon, I'm done. I'm done with you right now.
Yeah. This guy, if you heard him, he said, you call on the same people all the time. Well, why is that? Well, it's obvious because they don't want to answer any questions from anybody that's not a Democrat Party propaganda artist. Like, for example, she called on a reporter to ask Dr. Fauci about conspiracy theories, right? Misinformation, which is the first clip that I played at the beginning of this video. And it's funny because Dr. Fauci, he was just wrong, right? He's the one talking about we got to put out correct information. Well, you were wrong about masks. You were wrong about the virus. You were wrong about the vaccine, right? You were wrong about the origins of the virus, which again, this is what this report is trying to ask about. Very important. But yet you're trying to lecture us on putting out correct information, and anybody that doesn't go along with your narrative is a crackpot. They're conspiracy theorists, even though there are other scientists that were screaming and yelling the things that we now know to be true, even though back then people were saying that it was false. And again, these scientists like Dr. Robert Malone were smeared, right? They were smeared as crackpots. They weren't real scientists. They was discredited, even though they may have had years of academic research in the field that they're talking about. They have, won awards or whatever. Doesn't matter. If you didn't go along with the Fauci narrative, then you were incorrect. You're a crackpot. You're a conspiracy theorist. Turns out the conspiracy theorists, they were a lot more accurate than Fauci was, okay? But again, throughout this whole press conference, Karine Jean-Pierre was clearly trying to shield Fauci from any tough questions. Like, watch this. Watch Karine Jean-Pierre and her reaction to Fauci being asked about a potential GOP investigation into him and him having to testify in front of Congress. Take a look.
All right, thank you, Dr.
How are you
Fauci.
preparing
Thank you.
for the likely aggressive oversight from House Republicans, the new majority next year that they've been promising on some
Hold
of
on
these
one
very-
second. Dr. Jha is going to stay to take a couple more questions, but Dr. Fauci actually has to go. So thank you so much, Dr. Fauci.
Thank you. I can answer his
You want to
question.
do the answer?
Yeah.
Okay. He says I'll
See,
answer it. Okay,
I'm a good-
go ahead.
yeah.
Go ahead. I'm just trying to keep him
all
on
right.
time.
The answer is, if there are oversight hearings, I absolutely will cooperate fully and testify before the Congress if asked. You may not know, but I've testified before the Congress a few hundred times, okay, over the last 40 years or so. So I have no trouble testifying. We can defend and explain and stand by everything that we've said. So I have nothing to hide.
Just a quick follow-up on that, Dr. Fauci. How much do you think, Dr. Fauci, how much do you think, just a follow-up on
Yeah, so you guys saw that, right? You guys saw how much she was going out of her way to, again, make sure the guy does not get any hard questions, right? So again, you're able to get in the questions that fit the narrative, okay, that Democrats want to put out there, but, questions that go against the narrative, no, Fauci can't take those questions. He can't take those questions, right? He can't answer any of those questions. Again, it sucks because, one, they're not being transparent, and two, because they're not being transparent, this is why we have to waste time in the House investigating this stuff, right? If Fauci could actually be questioned by real journalists, right, and we could actually get some transparency from this administration, we wouldn't have to have these oversight investigations, stuff like that. We wouldn't have to take up time in Congress to look into this stuff. Karine Jean-Pierre always wants to criticize the Republicans about, well, why are you taking time to do these investigations? Why don't you help us out with inflation? Again, as if the Democrats are going to get on board with the GOP's, solution to inflation. I don't think so. Okay. But that's her number one criticism. And it's like, well, here's the thing. If everything wasn't so corrupt, if everything wasn't so crooked, if you guys could be more transparent about things, if you were actually calling on journalists, like actual real journalists, not just left-wing liberal media journalists, if he was actually calling on other journalists to ask questions so that we can get all different perspectives, we can get different answers on things, we wouldn't have to do a lot of stuff, right? We would not have to do a lot of this stuff. Again, the only reason we have to do the investigation into Joe Biden is because mainstream liberal media refused to report on it. They said it was Russian disinformation instead of doing real investigative journalism and verifying that it was real. So therefore, now we have to do the investigation. Lo and behold, when the GOP does the investigation, CBS News comes out and says, oh, by the way, guys, we said that Hunter Biden laptop was a conspiracy. It's actually real, right? Yeah, ain't it funny how that works? Ain't it funny how that works? So yeah, that's the point of having to do the investigations. Because if you don't do the investigations, the mainstream media will never look into things. And in Dr. Fauci's case, we need to know whether or not our taxpayer dollars went to the funding of this virus, okay? Was this a lab leak? What actually is the origin of this virus? And did our taxpayer funding under Dr. Fauci go towards funding this, a virus that ultimately ended up shutting down the world, right? I mean, people lost their lives, okay, over this virus. Millions of people, okay? People were financially hurt. Again, people lost their jobs. There's so many things that were destroyed because of this virus. Yeah, we need to know whether U.S. taxpayer funding went towards this or not, right? We need to know. I think the American people have a right to know if we're funding these risky experiments that, again, shut down the whole world. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.